frontal sinus, nasal cavity, nostrils, hard palate, oral cavity, bronchus, right lung, soft palate, pharynx, epiglottis, larynx, esophagus, trachea, left lung, right phrenic nerve, aortic arch, superior vena cava, diaphragm, left common carotid artery, left internal jugular vein, parietal pleura, pleural cavity, visceral pleura, pericardium, larynx, trachea, right main bronchus, upper lobe bronchus, intermediate bronchus, cartilaginous ring, bifurcation of trachea, lower lobe bronchi, superior lobe, oblique fissure, inferior lobe, apex of lung, interior border, horizontal fissure, middle lobe, right subclavian artery, right subclavian vein, right brachiocephalic vein, left brachiocephalic vein, superior vena cava, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, cardiac impression, rib 1, bronchus to superior lobe, intermediate bronchus, esophagus, azygos vein, inferior vena cava, diaphragmatic surface, apex of lung, interior border, cardiac notch, superior lobe, oblique fissure, inferior lobe, lingula, rib 1, bronchus, esophagus, thoracic aorta, left subclavian artery, left brachiocephalic vein, aortic arch, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, cardiac impression, diaphragmatic surface, sternum, superior mediastinum, inferior mediastinum, diaphragm, rib 1, interior mediastinum, middle mediastinum, posterior mediastinum, bronchus, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, pulmonary ligament, superficial temporal artery, external carotid artery, external carotid artery, internal carotid artery, internal carotid artery, right common carotid artery, right common carotid artery, brachiocephalic artery, brachiocephalic artery, axillary artery, axillary artery, intercostal artery, intercostal artery, deep brachial artery, deep brachial artery, brachial artery, brachial artery, renal artery, renal artery, ulnar artery, ulnar artery, radial artery, radial artery, common iliac artery, common iliac artery, internal iliac artery, internal iliac artery, external iliac artery, external iliac artery, deep femoral artery, deep femoral artery, popliteal artery, popliteal artery, interior tibial artery, interior tibial artery, peroneal artery, peroneal artery, posterior tibial artery, posterior tibial artery, dorsalis pedis artery, dorsalis pedis artery, left common carotid artery, left common carotid artery, subclavian artery, subclavian artery, aorta, aorta, coronary artery, coronary artery, middle suprarenal artery, middle suprarenal artery, celiac artery, celiac artery, superior mesenteric artery, superior mesenteric artery, lumbar artery, lumbar artery, inferior mesenteric artery, inferior mesenteric artery, gonadal artery, gonadal artery, femoral artery, femoral artery, superficial temporal vein, superficial temporal vein, interior facial vein, interior facial vein, internal jugular vein, internal jugular vein, right brachiocephalic vein, right brachiocephalic vein, axillary vein, axillary vein, cephalic vein, cephalic vein, brachial vein, brachial vein, basilic vein, basilic vein, median cubital vein, median cubital vein, radial vein, radial vein, ulnar vein, ulnar vein, external iliac vein, external iliac vein, femoral vein, femoral vein, popliteal vein, popliteal vein, posterior tibial vein, posterior tibial vein, small saphenous vein, small saphenous vein, interior tibial vein, interior tibial vein, external jugular vein, external jugular vein, subclavian vein, subclavian vein, superior vena cava, superior vena cava, azygos vein, azygos vein, hepatic vein, hepatic vein, inferior vena cava, inferior vena cava, renal vein, renal vein, ascending lumbar vein, ascending lumbar vein, gonadal vein, gonadal vein, common iliac vein, common iliac vein, internal iliac vein, internal iliac vein, great saphenous vein, great saphenous vein, right common carotid artery, right common carotid artery, right subclavian artery, right subclavian artery, left common carotid artery, left common carotid artery, brachiocephalic trunk, brachiocephalic trunk, aortic arch, ascending aorta, ascending aorta, left coronary artery, left coronary artery, aortic bulb, right coronary artery, right coronary artery, pericardial branch, pericardial branch, superior phrenic artery, superior phrenic artery, left subclavian artery, left subclavian artery, aortic isthmus, bronchial branch, bronchial branch, mediastinal branch, mediastinal branch, descending aorta, descending aorta, posterior intercostal artery, posterior intercostal artery, esophageal branch, esophageal branch, subcostal artery, subcostal artery, right carotid artery, right carotid artery, right vertebral artery, right vertebral artery, innominate artery, innominate artery, left carotid artery, left carotid artery, left vertebral artery, left vertebral artery, subclavian artery and vein, subclavian artery and vein, right brachiocephalic vein, right brachiocephalic vein, superior vena cava, superior vena cava, right superior intercostal vein, right superior intercostal vein, azygos vein, azygos vein, hepatic vein, hepatic vein, inferior vena cava, inferior vena cava, right and left suprarenal vein, right and left suprarenal vein, right renal vein, right renal vein, right ovarian testicular vein, right ovarian testicular vein, brachiocephalic trunk, brachiocephalic trunk, left brachiocephalic vein, left brachiocephalic vein, aortic arch, aortic arch, accessory hemiazygos vein, accessory hemiazygos vein, hemiazygos vein, hemiazygos vein, adrenal gland, adrenal gland, left kidney, left kidney, left renal vein, left renal vein, left ovarian testicular vein, left ovarian testicular vein, abdominal aorta, abdominal aorta, true rib, 1 to 7 rib, true rib, 1 to 7 rib, false rib, 8 to 12 rib, false rib, 8 to 12 rib, floating rib, 11 to 12 rib, floating rib, 11 to 12 rib, thoracic vertebra, thoracic vertebra, manubrium, manubrium, body, body, sternum, sternum, xiphoid process, xiphoid process, rib, rib, costal cartilage, costal cartilage, jugular notch, jugular notch, manubrium of sternum, manubrium of sternum, sternal angle, body of sternum, body of sternum, superior articular process, superior articular process, costal facet of transverse process, costal facet of transverse process, intervertebral disc, intervertebral disc, inferior articular process, inferior articular process, inferior costal facet, inferior costal facet, vertebral body, vertebral body, RIP5, RIP5, costal cartilage, costal cartilage, superior costal facet, superior costal facet, sternum, sternum, head, head, neck, neck, tubercle, tubercle, angle, angle, internal surface, costal groove, external surface, non-articular surface, articular facet, interarticular crest, superior vena cava, right pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery, right pulmonary vein, right pulmonary vein, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, inferior vena cava, aorta, pulmonary trunk, left pulmonary artery, left pulmonary vein, left atrium, aortic valve, mitral valve, mitral valve, left ventricle, pulmonary valve, cardiac apex, pulmonary artery, vein, systemic vein, capillary, cell, lungs, pulmonary vein, pulmonary circuit, systemic circuit, artery, systemic artery, mitochondria, aortic arch, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, ductus venosus, hepatic portal vein, umbilical veins, placenta, ductus arteriosus, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary veins, left atrium, left ventricle, abdominal aorta, left renal artery, common iliac artery, umbilical artery, internal iliac artery, superior vena cava, ascending aorta, right atrium, right coronary artery, right ventricle, right marginal branch, aortic arch, pulmonary trunk, left coronary artery, left atrium, circumflex branch, left anterior descending branch, left marginal branch, left ventricle, posterior interventricular branch, brachiocephalic trunk, interior cardiac vein, coronary sinus, small cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, left common carotid artery, left subclavian artery, great cardiac vein, left pulmonary artery, left pulmonary vein, oblique vein of left atrium, posterior vein of left ventricle, right pulmonary artery, aorta, right pulmonary vein, inferior vena cava, superior lobe of right lung, horizontal fissure of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, right oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of right lung, trachea, superior lobe of left lung, mediastinum, left oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of left lung, superior lobe of right lung, horizontal fissure of right lung, right main bronchus, middle lobe of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, right oblique major fissure, right oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of right lung, inferior lobe of right lung, superior lobe of left lung, superior lobe of left lung, left main bronchus, left main bronchus, left oblique major fissure, left oblique major fissure, mediastinum, mediastinum, inferior lobe of left lung, inferior lobe of left lung, thoracic aorta, thoracic aorta, thoracic vertebra, thoracic vertebra, trachea, trachea, superior lobe of right lung, superior lobe of right lung, superior mediastinum, superior mediastinum, esophagus, esophagus, superior lobe of left lung, superior lobe of left lung, tracheal bifurcation, tracheal bifurcation, right oblique major fissure, right oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of right lung, inferior lobe of right lung, mediastinum, mediastinum, left oblique major fissure, left oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of left lung, inferior lobe of left lung, horizontal fissure of right lung, horizontal fissure of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, right main bronchus, right main bronchus, left main bronchus, left main bronchus, middle lobe of right lung, middle lobe of right lung, right oblique major fissure, right oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of right lung, inferior lobe of right lung, superior lobe of left lung, superior lobe of left lung, mediastinum, mediastinum, left oblique major fissure, left oblique major fissure, inferior lobe of left lung, inferior lobe of left lung, abdominal space, abdominal space, right lung, rib, rib, body of sternum, left lung, costal cartilage, manubrium of sternum, right ventricle, liver, sternal angle, left ventricle, diaphragm, fissure for ligamentum teres, clavicle, ascending aorta, right atrium, sternoclavicular joint, left brachiocephalic vein, pulmonary trunk, aortic valve, stomach, clavicle, brachiocephalic artery, superior vena cava, ascending aorta, right lung, right atrium, inferior vena cava, liver, left brachiocephalic vein, left common carotid artery, aortic arch, pulmonary trunk, left lung, left atrium, left ventricle, esophagus, stomach, right internal jugular vein, right subclavian vein, trachea, right pulmonary vein, abdominal aorta, thyroid gland lift lobe, left subclavian vein, spleen, right common carotid artery, right subclavian artery, right subclavian artery, tracheal bifurcation, tracheal bifurcation, right pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery, left pulmonary vein, left pulmonary vein, thoracic aorta, thoracic aorta, right common carotid artery, right common carotid artery, esophagus, esophagus, right main bronchus, right main bronchus, right lung, liver, liver, left subclavian vein, left subclavian vein, left subclavian artery, left subclavian artery, aortic arch, aortic arch, left pulmonary artery, left pulmonary artery, left main bronchus, left main bronchus, left atrium, left atrium, left lung, thoracic aorta, thoracic aorta, spleen, spleen, humerus head, thoracic vertebra, right kidney, scapula, scapula, left kidney, spinal canal, right common carotid artery, clavicle, clavicle, right subclavian vein, right lung, right subclavian artery, trachea, scapula, left common carotid artery, left subclavian vein, left subclavian artery, left lung, esophagus, rip, manubrium of sternum, brachiocephalic artery, right brachiocephalic vein, thoracic vertebra, left brachiocephalic vein, spinal canal, transverse process, spinous process, body of sternum, superior vena cava, pectoralis muscle, mammary gland, aortic arch, body of sternum, ascending aorta, superior vena cava, right pulmonary artery, esophagus, right lung, nipple, mammary gland, pulmonary trunk, left bronchus, left pulmonary artery, scapula, left lung, descending aorta, right atrium, left atrium, thoracic vertebra, rip, conus arteriosus, aortic sinus, left pulmonary vein, spinal canal, transverse process, spinous process, xiphoid process, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, left ventricle, mitral valve, body of sternum, right ventricle, right atrium, inferior vena cava, esophagus, right lung, right lung, left ventricle, descending aorta, hemiazygos vein, left lung, liver, portal vein, right cricep diaphragm, erector spinae muscle, stomach, spleen, left cricep diaphragm, spinal canal, ascending aorta, left anterior descending artery, right coronary artery, right ventricle, left circumflex artery, diagonal branch of lat, left ventricle, left coronary artery, pulmonary artery, left circumflex artery, left atrium, obtuse marginal branch of LCA, pulmonary vein, aortic sinus, obtuse marginal branch of LCA, right clavicle, sternal angle, rip, manubrium of sternum, body of sternum, right lung, right lobe of liver, hepatic flexure of colon, sternocleidomastoid muscle, sternoclavicular joints, left lung, ascending aorta, heart, pericardium, stomach, jejunum, lung, tracheal bifurcation, pulmonary trunk, right lung, right ventricle, diaphragm, right lobe of liver, portal vein, aortic arch, left lung, left ventricle, stomach, spleen, abdominal aorta, hepatic vein, stomach fold, right kidney, psoas muscle, pulmonary vein, left atrium, left pulmonary artery, left kidney, sternum, superior vena cava, right pulmonary artery, descending aorta, ascending aorta, pulmonary trunk, left pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, right lung, right ventricle, scapula, right atrium, right lung, right ventricle, left ventricle, descending aorta, inferior vena cava, right lobe of liver, pericardium, esophagus, left atrium, mitral valve, papillary muscle, papillary muscle, myocardium, myocardium, left ventricle, cardiac apex, right ventricle, tricuspid valve, right atrium, interatrial septum, pericardium, interventricular septum, mitral valve, left atrium, papillary muscle, myocardium, left ventricle, cardiac apex, right ventricle, tricuspid valve, right atrium, interatrial septum, pericardium, interventricular septum, breast nipple, fatty tissue, fascia pectoralis muscle, right internal thoracic artery, right lung, breast valley, ampulla of lactiferous duct, glandular tissue, sternum, heart, right carotid artery, right vertebral artery, right subclavian artery, brachiocephalic trunk, innominate artery, left carotid artery, left vertebral artery, left subclavian artery, right vertebral artery, right common carotid artery, right subclavian artery, brachiocephalic artery, ascending aorta, left external carotid artery, left internal carotid artery, carotid artery bifurcation, left vertebral artery, left common carotid artery, left subclavian artery, aortic arch, right internal carotid artery, right external carotid artery, right carotid artery bifurcation, right common carotid artery, catheter, right pulmonary artery, pigtail catheter, diaphragm, left pulmonary artery, main pulmonary artery, right common carotid artery, right subclavian artery, brachiocephalic artery, ascending aorta, right pulmonary vein, left common carotid artery, left subclavian artery, aortic arch, left pulmonary vein, left atrium, left ventricle, descending aorta, left mainstem coronary artery, left circumflex artery, left anterior descending artery, left anterior descending artery, obtuse marginal branch of LCA, obtuse marginal branch of LCA, septal arteries, diagonal branch of LAD, diagonal branch of LAD, right coronary artery, right coronary artery, right ventricular artery, right ventricular artery, posterior interventricular artery, posterior interventricular artery, retroventricular artery, retroventricular artery, spinous process, right clavicle, trachea, sternoclavicular joint, sternoclavicular joint, right main bronchus, pulmonary vessel, rip, right atrium, soft tissue of breast, diaphragm, costophrenic angle, lung apex, aortic arch, scapula, left main bronchus, lung marking, descending aorta, left ventricle, stomach air, sternum, heart, vertebral body, vertebral foramen, right hemidiaphragm, left hemidiaphragm, right clavicle, trachea, right main bronchus, right atrium, right hemidiaphragm, soft tissue of breast, rip, lung apex, left main bronchus, left ventricle, descending aorta, left hemidiaphragm, air fluid level, pleural effusion, heart, interventricular septum, left ventricle, mitral valve, right ventricle, ascending aorta, aortic valve, left atrium, myocardium, papillary muscle, tricuspid valve, interatrial septum, right atrium,